We are joined today by Mrs. Anne Cato, a retired nurse and midwife from Southampton Hospital, and worked there from 1972 to 2014, and is currently working as a mental health advisor as a volunteer in Southampton at the St. Denis Activities Group. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
And tell us, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Kenya. I was born in a small village called Chuka, and then eventually I moved to another small village called Embu, and those two places I grew up.
Okay. Well, what did you move when you were old enough to know you're moving, or you were still a baby?
I was old enough to know because my father had a job in Chuka. So we moved. When he retired, we just moved. So I knew exactly where we were going.
And is that where you eventually grew up?
Yes.
And went to school? Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
I went to a primary school near my home where I used to walk. And then after that, I went to secondary school, a Catholic secondary school, which was a boarding school, because boarding schools was better, to get better education. So my parents paid for that, and I went to boarding school.
How old were you starting boarding school?
That's a good question. I can't quite remember that one. Because in Kenya, sometimes you start school when you are slightly older.
Okay.
It's not 5. So I was probably slightly older when I went to boarding school.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So probably they're a little bit more mature than 5, so you could handle boarding school.
Oh, yeah. The secondary school was from 16 anyway.
Right.
So it was that age group, so that you can look after yourself. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about growing up there.
I grew up in those small villages. It was a community-based village. Basically, I've got a mother, father, brothers, and sisters, and a lot of friends. So I grew up in a very happy environment because everybody knew each other. You could walk anywhere safely, and you could go to people's house and have something to eat. So there was no strangers. It was really beautiful environment I was brought in.
And then you went to secondary school in that same area, or was that then a next boarding school altogether?
The boarding school was like 2 miles from my primary school. So I went to that boarding school, which again was within the walking distance. We used to walk everywhere anyway. There was a few cars here and there, but most of us just used to walk, and we used to enjoy walking. And I think that shaped my desire to walk, because I still walk a lot.
Fantastic.
I love walking when the weather is good.
It's the best keep fit activity.
Absolutely.
I think for anybody.
I just love it. Love it.
So you were not far away from home. I usually imagine when somebody goes to boarding school, they're like, shipped up and packed away for, miles on end, stay there for the week, then come on the weekends. But you could walk home when you finish.
You could walk home during the holidays. You are not allowed to go home when you are in boarding school.
Okay.
It was not allowed because we had nuns from UK teaching us. Right. And everybody had to stay in that college, which was fine because there was others with us anyway. So it wasn't far. I think the farther I went is when I finished my secondary school, and I went to work in Barclays Bank in Kenya.
Okay.
Again, it was about 20 miles from home. So I wasn't too far from home. I didn't go to big cities like Nairobi or Mombasa to work. I was within my Embu environment.
So when you finished secondary school at boarding school, you went into work Barclays Bank?
Yes.
Okay.
I worked there for 2 years before I came here.
Okay.
Yes. Because when you apply to come here, you have to wait for them to process your application. And then it took about 2 years. Then I eventually came.
So the environment you grew up in, you describe as a sort of close community
Yes.
environment.
Yes.
You value that?
I value that very much because it was an environment where you felt a sense of belonging. I belonged to that community. It was an environment that the parents brought children the same way and they were disciplined the same way. So you couldn't say, actually, my parents are telling me don't do that and don't do that, because the other parents won't be telling you the same anyway.
Yeah.
So that shaped me very well, and I really appreciate my upbringing because I think that helped me when I came to this country.
Interesting.
Because my mind was well set.
Yeah.
I knew where I belonged. I belonged in my community, and I value my community very much. I was also brought up in a political environment because my brother was a politician. And before I came here, he was Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Wow.
So whenever he was doing his campaign, I would go with him and I was listening to what he was saying. He was fighting for the people of his constituency. And he wanted better things for the people of their constituency. So that was building me up very nicely. And that is my upbringing. My father was an agricultural officer and he was farm as well. So we were brought up in an environment, although you were a bit better off, you treated other people the same because it was not allowed for us to show off.
It's really interesting, isn't it? How you describe that close-knit community and the attitude that you came out of it with. So just tell us a little bit more about what your father did, and did your mum as well work?
Yes, my father was an agriculture officer, so he was employed by the government to go and encourage people to do proper farming so that they can produce more crop. And he was going from district to district. And my mother was a housewife, but also a farmer. And what used to happen is during school holidays, my mother would take us farming with her. So we learned how to farm as well.
Sounds wonderful.
Yes, it was fantastic. But we used to walk miles to some farms because you have to look for fertile land.
Right.
So it was walking again.
So lots of walking.
Lots of walking.
That might be the theme of this.
Yes, lots of
walking.
Yeah.
But hard work as well.
Hard work, but we enjoyed it.
And fun.
We loved it because everybody else around you was doing the same. So you didn't think, why am I doing that when other kids are not doing it? It was all the preparation for us to cope in life. So that was our preparation.
Sounds interesting. So when did you decide, or did your parents decide to come to the UK, or is it you on your own?
I'll tell you how it happened. I came here on my own, first of all.
Okay.
My brother, who was Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, knew the head of nursing in Kenyatta Hospital. She had trained in Southampton, and she says Southampton, one of the best training schools. So she recommended I come here. So through that route, I came here.
So you did nursing here, not in Kenya?
No, I did my nursing and midwifery in Southampton General Hospital.
All right.
It was smaller then. It's not as it's big now.
It is massive now.
It's massive, yes. So that's how I came.
All right. So did your parents come eventually?
No, my parents have never been here.
Oh, they've never been.
They stayed at home and they loved home.
Okay.
Yes.
So you decided after you worked in the bank, is that right?
That's correct. I decided to come here because I've always wanted to be a nurse. And then eventually I did midwifery.
Yes.
I ended up actually being a midwife for most of my midwifery nursing career.
Right.
So when you are training, they sometimes will send you to Southampton Hospital, but I didn't actually work as a qualified nurse or anything in the Southampton Hospital.
And St. Anne's Hospital, where its maternity suite is what I mean.
Princess Anne Hospital,
sorry.
It's maternity.
Yeah.
And that's where I spent quite a lot of my years.
Interesting, isn't it?
Princess Anne Hospital.
So Anne worked at Princess Anne Maternity Hospital. I love it.
Yes,
it's fantastic.
yes.
And tell us, what are your most vivid memories of home?
I don't have, when you say vivid, I don't have vivid memories at home. I seem to remember quite a lot of things. When I was small and going to school, sometimes lunchtime we ran home to have lunch and go back. And that was probably 5, 6 years old. I remember that as far as that. And the way we used to know the time so that you are not late, because the discipline was there, was you stand up straight in the sun, and if your shadow counted 3 steps, you are late. So that's because we didn't have watches. So my memory at home was just really community environment. That's all I remember. I don't remember. There were some poor people, very poor people. But again, my father used to collect all the poor people and bring them to our home to feed them. So that is how I'm brought up. And I've carried that with me throughout.
That sounds like a sense of community you've socialized in, you grew up with and in. And just based on the introduction, and it sounds to me, and we will uncover that a little bit more, you've continued that kind of work, that kind of lifestyle, let's say, because it doesn't sound like work to me. It sounds like a lifestyle of supporting people as best as you can when you can.
Absolutely, that is absolutely correct.
And would you say these are your last memories of your home?
The last memories of my home, obviously, was working in the bank. In some bank, I did very well, but I didn't enjoy it because my passion was to help other people as a nurse and midwife. So that was really, when I worked in the bank again, we got on very well with the manager, with everybody else who was working. And within that town, which is Embu town, again, you knew everybody. You spoke to everybody as you walking home and coming to work. So I didn't have far to walk to work either. And when you are in the shops, hello, that's a Muni child.
A Moni child?
Muni.
Oh,
Muni. That was my surname then.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because obviously my father was well known and my brother was well known.
And by the way, how many siblings did you have? So you have a brother who was in politics.
Yeah, I have a late brother now. I have 3 brothers in total, 4 sisters. Well, obviously including me, it was 5.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 sisters. So in total it was 8.
8.
Yes.
Big family.
Big family, didn't feel like it. And we still get on very well.
Tell us a little bit about your travel journey to Southampton.
When I left home, I went to Nairobi, obviously, because the airport is in Nairobi. So I slept. One of my sisters was working in Nairobi, so I stayed with her. And then my brother took me, obviously, he was in government, so he took me to the airport. And I was saying it was British Airways, but it was BOAC.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, somebody else told me about
BOAC.
Yeah, BOAC.
So that's how I came here. Basically, I came with BOAC Airways, and I landed at Heathrow Airport.
Okay.
Yes, all on my own.
Intriguing, interesting, or was it cold?
When I arrived here, it was very cold. Actually, I arrived here on 16th of January, 1972. I remember it as anything, and it was snowing. I thought, what's that white stuff? And it was snow. It was snowing, it was cold. I was not dressed appropriately for the weather, so I was cold. But I was picked from the airport by the ambassador of Kenya then, and they took me to their home in London. Okay. I stayed there overnight, and they gave me some warm clothes. And then the following day, the ambassador's driver took me to Waterloo, put me in the train to Southampton. And when I arrived in Southampton, it was good old days then. In 1972, there was somebody from the nursing side waiting for me to take me to the nurses' home.
Wonderful.
So I had a good handover.
Yeah.
And when I got to the nurses' home, there was a warden in the nurses' home. Mm-hmm. She welcomed me, and obviously she showed me my room. And then they brought me lunch in the room. And my travel was good. I can't complain. those days it was good.
Tell me, Anne, what were your initial impressions of Southampton?
Do you know something? My imagination of England itself was just buildings, and I thought it was just buildings and nothing else.
Yeah.
When I came, I was traveling from Waterloo to Southampton. I saw all these trees and all these farms and all these greeneries, and I'm thinking, is this England? It's even more greener than some parts of Kenya. Then when I came to Southampton, it was the same again. So I thought, oh, this is home then. This is my home.
Yes.
Yes. It was green, it was quiet, it was cold, obviously. I didn't like the cold. I wasn't used to that sort of cold. Although in Kenya, sometimes you have a little cold weather in the mountains. It was nothing to compare in January 1972.
In England at that time.
Yes, it was cold.
And anything else sort of caught your attention? Because you describe a good travel journey.
Yes.
I mean, and you were met by somebody, they took you to the nurse's home rather,
Yes.
and, introduced there as well. Did you have an occasion to go out into city centre, into the area?
Oh, definitely. I very quickly made friends. There was nurses from Jamaica who are already here. And there was nurses from, I want to say Malawi. No, it was not. Malaysia. Yeah. And there was one male nurse as well from Malaysia. Do you know something? We became friends. We had an environment that when you came from your nurses training, there was always somebody there. So we formed this unit.
Yes.
And sometimes we'll cook together. Sometimes we'll learn different foods, the Malaysian food, the Kenyan food, and Jamaican food. So that's how the environment was again. So I've come from an environment of community to another community. And what happened in those years, in 1972, the people who had been here before looked after people who came. So I was very lucky. And even today, my best friend is Jamaican, and I made friends with her. Her name is Paulette. She won't mind me mentioning her. I made friends with her when I came to this country. And she had a family in Southampton, and she used to take me to her family home whenever we were off. So I was blessed. They took us from the nurses' home that I came to. They took us to another nurses' home in the New Forest as a group.
Okay.
So that group was British, Malaysian, Africans, and again, everybody became friends. It was a big old house. A Victorian house, and that's where we stayed for 3 months. So. And
were you staying there, as in working in the New Forest, or traveling back to Southampton?
Traveling back to Southampton,
okay.
General, yes. Yeah.
And they provided transport?
Yes, we were picked and dropped.
Wow.
You won't see that anymore. No.
So if Southampton General is listening.
No. They can be listening, but it's the truth.
Wow.
These days you have to make your way wherever you're going. But those days in 1972, it was good.
And it sounds like a level of respect for nurses, for trainees, that perhaps has been lost along the way. And I don't want to get political at this point, but I'm just observing that. Because the next point is, and you've started saying it, who supported you in those early days?
The person, when we moved back to our nurses' home at the General Hospital, our tutor, who I remember very clearly, her name was Mrs. Finlay. That's the only name I remember. She was so good that she would check on you. When you go to class, when you go to canteen, she was behind you, supporting you. Because obviously, when we went to the canteen, some of the food, I was thinking, what is that? I don't know that. And I remember the funniest thing was I put, at home, in Kenya, we have a lot of Indian, and we're used to things like chapatis.
Right.
So we learned how to cook chapatis. So I went in the canteen. On my main meal plate, I put a pancake, thinking it's a chapati. And she came behind me and she said, "That's a pudding." I said, "What is a pudding?" She said, "That's something you have after. It's sweet." So very quietly she said, and I was so happy to see that because I thought, oh, that's something I know. That's my chapati. I'll enjoy the food today, but it was a pancake. And I never forgot it today. But her approach was so good. She didn't make me feel embarrassed. She just whispered. Yeah, it was good.
So that you got that learning in a gentle, kind way rather than you're not from here, what are you doing? Yeah.
No, I didn't get any of that. We had one main tutor, that Mrs. Finlay.
Yes.
And I remember when I wrote my first essay, she said, "How come you write such good English?" I said, "English was my favorite subject in school." Mm-hmm. And she couldn't get over it. And I passed very well with my first essay. So, but her approach was so good. You couldn't really do with a better person than that lady.
Wow.
Yeah.
Describe your early experience of the food, of the learning, and the job itself.
My early food, obviously, with food. My early learning with food, the food was not what I was used to. Mm-hmm. As you can see, I put pancake instead of chapati.
Pancakes are not chapatis.
So eventually I learned potatoes were the main thing, chips and things like that. Then I learned things like pudding, sponge pudding at home. When you finish eating, the main meal is fruit. That's what we were offered, fruit. You have your fruit.
Yes.
So the food was not really what I was used to. But eventually, in the nurse's home, we found an Indian shop just near where we are now that sold food that I knew from Kenya. So we started coming to buy food from the Indian shop, and we used to cook and eat and share.
You mean a shop in St. Mary's here?
Yes. I can't even remember where I was now because it was so small then.
All right.
Yes, but that's where. But that was my experience with food.
So the food shop goes back to the 70s?
Yes.
Wow.
Whichever food shop it was, we found it.
Yeah.
We found it. And
then you could get your stuff from Kenya and you could get other international stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And I was very happy with that.
Mm-hmm. And what about post-qualification? Describe a life then as a qualified nurse a little bit.
Well, throughout my training, I worked very hard. I passed first time. I didn't fail in exams, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And when I qualified, there was some challenging encounters where you find some people are a bit racist because you're black. Others, the minority, basically. Some patients were racist as well when you're a black nurse. Mm-hmm. But with the resilience that I came from Kenya with, I challenged every obstacle that came on my way. And with the political background that I was brought up with, I challenged all the racism. I never left it. And just used to go to the seniors and say, this has happened to me. But unluckily, some of them didn't know how to deal with it.
Yes.
They would just tell you, just ignore it. And I would say, So, that was my failure. I enjoyed my nursing and midwifery. The nursing was good then because you learned the practical things first. You learned about the patient.
Yes.
You learned about to feed the patient. You learn about the needs of the patient, and that before you even went to bigger things. And then you did your drug medication and things like that. And there was little good mentoring throughout. So when you qualified as a nurse and midwife, I hit the floor running. So I just got on with it.
You were well equipped.
Yeah, but there was a role model, and I'll tell you about this role model. She was a nurse at the General. She was black. She was senior. And I used to think, if you can get there in that seniority position, I'll get there too. That was my mentality.
Yes.
And she will come in the night and do a drag round and do the testing. And she was very firm, but very good. So that role model as well, I used to look. So it's very important to get role models in jobs.
Yes.
That you can look up to and think, if she got where she is, I'm going to get there too. And I did. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you had that aspiration.
I
and
had.
early on you had somebody who was a role model.
Absolutely. There wasn't many, very few. I think she's the only one I knew. But at least there was one that you could say, if you get there, I'm going to get there too.
Yes.
Yes.
Inspired.
I was inspired by her, and she spoke very well, very fluently. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you remind me about activities of daily living.
Absolutely.
It's just one of the tenets of nursing that you learn in the early days, don't you? Activities, ADLs.
Yes. And my midwifery, obviously, training was 1 year because you've done nursing. Now it's 18 months because there's 3 years now, actually, straight to midwifery.
Yes.
But because you are nursing, you are done nursing, you have learned more of the practical stuff. So it was 1 year. Again, the day I qualified, I hit the floor running.
And that's your qualification as a midwife?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I stayed in midwifery.
For a very extensive career.
Very expensive.
I imagine, my calculation, I hope it's right, 42 years.
Yeah, in nursing and midwifery.
That's more years than I am. Say less.
And you're not making me feel old either.
I would not imagine that you did 42 years retired and you're still volunteering.
I am, definitely. My passion is to help others.
Tell us something that you laugh about in those early days.
What I laugh about is the unity that we had as foreigners. We were foreigners then. It was really that the friendship that we made with the British nurses, with the Malaysian nurses, with the Jamaican nurses, that unity was there. And what I remember very clearly, we used to have parties in the nurses' home. We were not allowed to, but we used to have parties.
Nonetheless.
Because our culture is dancing. We used to love to dance. We love music. So when we were off, like weekends, we'll just either go out as well or have parties in the nurses' home. So that one I remember, and we still laugh about it.
Yes.
And the matron didn't know we were having parties.
And I imagine back in those days, it would have been a stricter environment, although it was nice, but stricter.
It was very strict environment, but we didn't drink alcohol in the nurses' home. So it was just fun. It was fun. Those are the memories I remember.
Yes.
And I wish I could bring it back today to the nurses of today to enjoy what we enjoyed.
And it was that, you described that togetherness from a multicultural point of view, and not just people coming into Britain, but British nurses as well.
Absolutely.
And I imagine when you say British at this point in time, it's white English British people you're talking about.
Absolutely. Exactly that. And they just joined us, and they would taste our food, and we go out together, and it was just nice. The environment was good. Obviously, there were challenges of racism from here and there. But I think when you're born in another country, you build that resilience. Obviously, I didn't expect it, but it's something you have to manage and challenge. Challenging racism is very important. If you leave it, it manifests and it makes you depressed. So people must challenge. We feel brave, but a lot of people have got a lot of fear to challenge racism. I didn't have the fear, I think, from my background with politicians.
But you also describe a supportive environment coming into your nursing training as well, from the senior nurses or the sister or your tutor. And it sounds as if it established that already resistant spirit in you, or that challenging spirit in you. You've qualified, or all the way through your training. you were on point.
Absolutely. The positives actually helped you. The positive things help you to cope with the negative stuff.
Yes.
Knowing there's so many people who are good and who are nice, who have joined you, who are with you. But you face this racism sometimes, but you knew there's this supportive group, and everybody was not the same. There was that small minority, but that is life.
But isn't that something that you do currently? Because what you're doing in volunteering in this mental health group in St. Denis activities is you're also saying the positive outweighs the negative.
Yes.
And you're inviting people in the community from the Black, Asian minority groups to come into it. Isn't that part of what you're still doing?
Absolutely. And the reason why I decided actually to start with, I supported elderly people. Then I decided mental health. And the reason why, when you look at people with mental health issues, they are marginalized. So again, there's discrimination within that. So I decided, let me support this group and see whatever we can do for this group. The little you can do helps. But what we do is you don't work in isolation. You work with organizations that have got the money, the power to support mental health services. So we work alongside them. So these are marginalized people. You can, and this is really important. We can see the issues in the community that affect them. The organizations see the treatment they give them. And sometimes you think if the organization could learn these issues make their mental health worse, maybe within that medication, they can apply some of the things that help people with mental health issues to cope with life. And can I give an example?
Absolutely.
An example is, the cost of living is awful at the moment.
Yes.
And there was all sorts of things put in place to help people to manage. But what they don't realize, some people will not go to an environment they do not know without support. And those people have not claimed what they are entitled to.
Right.
So it's things like that we see that professionals don't see. And if we could work, our aim is to work in collaboration to bring these issues to organizations.
And then how you describe it is you're pulling together those two parties, or you're bridging the gap almost. You're the bridge.
Yes.
To bring those services to the people who are marginalized.
Absolutely. So long as we can last and keep going, because we're volunteers. So it depends. But the little you do can help.
I like that. And what you're saying is, really, Anne, it's also an extension of that community mentality that you've been brought up into. You've been socialized into as well in the UK, in Southampton, here. In that, from the humble beginnings of your Malaysian friends, your Jamaican friends, your British friends, the support of your tutor, you're just continuing that even after your 42-year-long career in a successful way in the community.
Yeah, and I thank God for that. I thank God for that, because I've got the energy to do it. I've got the strength to do it.
Absolutely.
And that the difference you make and the changes you help make, to me, is a positive thing.
It's wonderful. I just want to say that at this point. Tell us something since you arrived here in Southampton. Since 1972, it's mind-blowing actually. But since you arrived, Anne, has much changed in the city, and has much changed with you?
I'll start with the city, then I'll come to me. The city has changed. In fact, for me, there was more smaller shops. There was CNAs, there was plumbers, there was Selfridges. There was British Home Stores, which has recently gone. There was lots of Woolworths. They were all there. But what we've seen in Southampton is the changes with the bigger mall like West Quay.
Yes.
So that's got more shops in it. But the quality of the shops for me was better when I came than now. We didn't have big supermarkets. Those are plus, obviously, now because there are so many of them. There was just few local shops you couldn't go to buy things. But it was nice because the environment was good as well. So that change is there. And obviously a lot of student buildings, which is positive things, lots of universities. There was just one then. And lots of houses have been built. The banks, I remember Lloyd's Bank. That's the only bank I could remember, and Barclays, I think, when I came to Southampton. But there could have been more, but those are the ones I remember. So it has changed quite a bit. For me, I am still got my African bit in me. Yes. I still love my home. I am British now, but I respect my home. When I go home, I'm Kenyan. I carry my bag on my back and things like that. And I can't say a lot has changed